video? Yeah. Okay. That's what. So I hope you'll set your expectations low. I've been told for years that I'm not a creative. I've been working in agencies for a long time, and I am not part of the creative team. So it was an interesting choice, I think, of Brandon to approach me as a speaker for Creative Mornings. But I appreciate it. 20 minutes is not a lot of time, so there is really just one idea that I'm going to get around to eventually. In the meantime, though, I'm going to do some jazz hands and show you a bit of how I got there and some of the things that are important to me. Hi there, I'm Michael. Anyone recognize this guy? No? This is Kurt Vonnegut. I'm not using him today for any particular reason. I'm not very good at drawing or designing as a visual artist, so I've borrowed a number of his drawings for my presentation. I love his writing because it's the kind of thing that lulls you into a sense of being relaxed enough to be creative. So I often come to these really interesting epiphanies or big ideas as I read his books, totally unrelated to the subject matter, but he has this way of almost, there's a cadence to his writing that lets you relax your brain, which is, I think, one of the really interesting ways to create an environment for creativity. All the images are taken from his book, Breakfast of Champions. That book's about symbols, and here's me stretching a bit, but creativity has become a little bit more like a symbol than something. I don't know that any of us would do a great job of describing what creativity is or means. We've all got kind of an intuitive sense for what it is, and in that way it's more of a symbol, much like most of the stuff in his book. So how many of you here work at kind of an ad agency? Come on, I know more than you. Okay, and what about like a digital or web agency? Yeah, and it's okay to put your hand up more than once. And what about kind of a design or other creative shop? Okay, so who hasn't put their hand up yet? Holy cow! Okay, good. So I'm going to assume that the rest of you think that us in the industry are just a bunch of these. Give it a sec. You'll get there. No? Okay. So those of you that aren't laughing, I'm going to assume that you interpreted that as stars. We're stars. Okay, no. Yeah, sometimes I feel like we're a bit like assholes. Not in the traditional sense, but because we treat creativity and we treat creative process and the things we do a bit like magic. It's like this miracle that we do. And for people outside the industry, that makes it interesting and that makes it fascinating. It makes it a little bit dangerous, but for us in the industry, especially when you're told that you're not a creative, it can make being creative a very intimidating thing. How do you do magic? How do I lock myself in a room and create something that is going to blow people's minds? And coming into the industry for many years, that was a really hard thing to live up to. I didn't ask. People didn't share the process necessarily, and I think part of it is because very few of us actually got what creative meant. So again, because there's so many people in this room from the industry, many of you will have at some time or another come to the same conclusions I have. You'll be thinking the same things. So at the end of this, there is a bit of time for discussion. So I would love to have you kind of add your thoughts when we go into the discussion bit, because as I discovered that I don't know it all, believe it or not. Don't tell. I also teach at the university, and there's two of my students here, so I probably shouldn't have said that. But I don't know it all. When I grew up, my family enjoyed logical argument around the dining room table. The trick was to identify insightful and logical connections from point A to point B. No steps missed along the way, no skipping steps, no magic, no mirrors. Logic was what we did. So I thought that I would go into a logical profession. I did production management. So for Labatt, I decided how many bottles of Blue they would make and how many bottles of Bud. And how it would get from point A to point B. I worked in management consulting. I did process and cost modeling. I did policy development. I did really exciting stuff like that that I was good at because my mind worked logically. It liked having a clear series of events and a clear series of things that you did and a clear finish line and clarity around whether you did a good job because in the end you could measure the results of all that. Today, I kind of half jokingly, but really regularly refer to myself as an ad man, which is a little bit pretentious, I know, but it's a cultural reference that people get. I think it would be really hard for me to describe to people that I was an analytical thinker who helped people solve problems through various communications tools. Most people probably wouldn't really appreciate why that was valuable. So today I'm an ad man. And I'm also an optimist, so I think throughout this, you may see that there's some points where I may make some suggestions that are not realistic, but I think that we can do a little bit better. So creativity is a little frightening. For me, that's because my history and my life and my education has made me into a person that needs to make sense of things. This was me making sense of what I was going to say today. There were about 6 more pages just like it, and it didn't work. So that's why I said chime in at the end, because I don't know if it makes sense. So why is creativity frightening to me? So firstly, on the left there, that electric chair, I think one day people are going to figure me out. I think one day people are going to figure out that I'm a fraud, that I don't actually know how to do this stuff, that I don't actually know what creativity is, that I don't know how to build these things. The second piece is, and this was an interesting one for me, the second thing is that I spent a lot of time doing the research and the analysis and developing insights. I might spend 8 months working on how to position a client in their industry or in their market. So creativity is frightening because creativity needs to take that 6 or 8 months of work and crystallize it into something that is perfect. One small, simple solution that captures all of that and that motivates people to do exactly what you want them to do. And I find that scary. Putting all that work I've done into a place where it's now either going to be used or it's not going to be used, that's frightening. And then the one on the right there, that's, I don't know if you can read it at the top, it says, "You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it sure helps." That's a picture he drew of a crazy person. Creativity is kind of crazy. It doesn't make sense. There is no finish line. There is no metric by which we judge the effectiveness or the usefulness or the goodness of creativity. And I have trouble with that. I like being able to measure how many bottles we made or whether we got to that point that we wanted to get to. And you can't really do that necessarily with the creative process. So, the tombstone says at the bottom, he tried. Again, I have to stretch a bit with some of these sketches, but so recognizing that I may be discovered as a fraud, I am not that person yet. That I have that the research and work I've done to this point is an asset and something to build on, and not something that I'm putting at risk. And that there are ways, and yes, I like process, there are ways to build process in that limit the crazy. So we'll dial back the crazy a bit, we'll use the foundation, and I have to be okay with not being qualified, and with all of you knowing that I'm a fraud. So what I've done, my business partner, Justin Archer, and I have started a new venture. We've both had the benefit of working with some of the most incredible minds in the world of advertising public relations that we can imagine, and they've taught us a lot about how to structure these roles. So rather than picking a traditional title and role for what I'm going to be doing in our agency, I will be the director of advertising and creative strategy. So my job is to create connections between the strategy and the creative. That's a role that's often served in agencies by the brief, and sometimes I find the brief doesn't do a good enough job of managing the process of being creative. It is supported by processes, and again, there's people from shops in here that do an incredible job of this, so this is being done, but I think it's incredibly important in my role to recognize that that linking the strategy to the creative is my primary role. So in the past, I've been the director of strategy and of other things, and that, again, becomes very distinct from the creative process. So we'll see how it works. But what I've done is I've given myself that role. So at the beginning I said, there's a lot of stuff I'm going to talk about, a bit about who I am and where I came from and why I think these things and what we're doing. But there's kind of one idea that I think if clients truly understood this and we as an industry truly understood this, that it, and again, not to say that any of you don't yet, but this is something that's important that I think we need to keep repeating, almost a mantra. But that bomb that's up on that screen there, Blue Monday was a one-act opera written in the 1920s. It was intended to be performed by black actors, but it was performed by white actors in blackface. This bomb, as you can see, essentially, the intent is, in more ways than one, to destroy that paradigm, that way of living, that way of acting, that's something that we want to wipe away. In that same vein, I think that a lot of us intuitively know this, but if we did a better job of helping our clients understand this and making sure that we truly understood it, I think we could do better off. I think that we confuse creativity sometimes a little bit. Creativity is not anarchy. Creativity is not the lack of rules and structure. Creativity is a tool. Creativity is something that I've learned to use as a very analytical thinker, as a very, let's say, boring sometimes. Yes, I'm the guy that writes the 160-page report on a market, but creativity is a tool I use to take that and create something interesting. So the whole idea of it not being anarchy kind of hurt me because I grew up in the punk rock community and I feel a bit like I don't know how I got to being in advertising. It feels so wrong. But I justified in my head and I rationalized this by saying it's okay. Saying this. Let's pretend like this is me being a little bit of a punk. Let's just call it that, because we all want to believe that creativity is this free, unrestricted, uninhibited process, and at moments it is, but altogether it's not. And ultimately, it's on us to help our clients understand this, not on them to get it. So I think we need to focus a little more on that. So what does that mean? I think that we need to open up that sacred miracle cave. The first thing is transparency. We need people to see the process more. I don't know what that means in different shops, different agencies. The way that you introduce your client to the process, you include them in the process, you help them participate in the process. Whether it's including your account team more in the creative process, or the people that aren't traditionally considered creatives in the process, maybe that's opening the cave in your agency. I think it also means we're going to have to practice. Again, creativity is a skill. It's a tool. I think we need to spend more time on that. And one of the things we've talked about with our little shop. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes. We're hiring our first employee right now, and we'll see if we can follow through on this like we had planned on. And I don't know if I stole this from Creative Mornings, but because I know I read about Creative Mornings a long time ago, but we're going to do something called Creative Mornings at our shop every day. From 8 to 9. And it's going to be an opportunity to do some of that more free exploration and that practicing creative processes and practicing the tools that you can use to be creative. So I hope I didn't steal it. I may have been inspired by it, let's say. I think we need to adjust our processes so that they inherently are creative. And one of the shops that we all know of that is incredible at this is IDEO. Their process of empathy, prototyping, storytelling, when you look at those, it's not research developing the brief concepts. The way they present their process actually inherently builds creativity into it. So we need to consider our processes and whether we can frame them differently so that we understand intuitively that creativity is part of them. And I hope that roles like mine, a director of creative strategy, becomes more prevalent. Not necessarily a creative director, but a director of creative strategy. I'm not a creative. I'm not necessarily the guy that comes up with the ideas, but I'm the guy that's responsible for making sure we have an environment that the ideas come out of. So, yep, you can't read that at all. So that says, not even the creator of the universe knew what the man was going to say next. Right now, creativity can feel a bit like a risk or a liability to our clients. When we take their input, we go back to our offices, we close the door, and we show up 2 weeks later with some brilliant solution, that feels risky to them. They don't know what we're doing. They don't know how we got there or how many options we tried or the things that we crossed off the list on the way there. If we can open up our process a bit to ourselves, to the people on our teams, to our clients, we can take creativity from being a liability to being an asset. If we can say that creativity is not anarchy, it is a tool, it is a process, we can take creativity from being unpredictable and kind of dangerous to thrilling. You know, for a client, that's what you want it to be. You don't want it to be unpredictable. You want it to be thrilling. And I think if we start to do this and we start to engage the broader community a little better in the creative process, we can educate a community of creative people, just like startups just doing, just like art scenes doing, just like we're doing at TEDx. And we can engage those people outside the traditional creative industries. So I don't know how I did for time. That's close-ish, maybe. Thank you. I really am honored to have been invited to speak at the first one of these. I'm still not sure I was the best choice, because again, I am a fraud. But I really enjoyed the opportunity to think through my creative process and how we can do it better. And it's, for me, given us an opportunity to think through some of these things and take them back and incorporate them into the way we do business. And I had to include this picture, not for any particular reason, but just because I thought it was the most badass picture in the book. But I could not find a reason to include a picture of a jacket that says Pluto Gang on the back. There's a story behind it, but you guys, I hope you take something home from this. But thanks very much again. So the question was, I had said that I'm not a creative person naturally. What are some of the tools I use to bridge that gap? One of the easiest things, one of the things I find most useful is actually just having more people in the room. I think that if I can bring creative people in, it makes it easier for my mind to kind of follow their lead. So having people like that around who are naturally the brainstormers, the people that come up with 1,000 ideas a minute, makes it a lot easier. The other piece is actually just a series of very simple tools. I've done some workshops around creativity. Actually, Ken and I met years ago at the Banff Center at a workshop, at the Laurie Rosenwald one. Yeah, that was about freeing yourself to be creative. So I've tried to do some work on that. I've actually kind of done some education that have given me some specific tools around brainstorming, filtering ideas, and then developing ideas. So having other people in the room and actually going out and seeking guidance and instruction on how to be creative. I know that sounds counterintuitive, like someone telling you how to be creative, but they give you tools. They'll give you methodologies that you can use. So again, that fits my analytical mind. There's step 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, so that's, so he was just saying that they give themselves at their office the freedom to be purely creative without intent or outcome on Fridays, which means that the creativity that happens through the rest of the week doesn't have to be anarchy. It can be structured and intentional, I suppose. Is that a good, yeah? Anyone else work like that? Anyone else have times during the week? Yeah, I see someone nodding. You're going to? Okay, how are you going to do that? Oh, nice. So you're going to build that time into your schedule because you work for yourself. Cool. Any other shops that have practices that help you work on that creative side? No? So nobody else? Dana, yeah. I get. That's interesting. So they take a full day to work as an entire team on one client. Again, coming back to get a lot of people in a room to solve some of these problems. You get some interesting creative opportunities. And again, do you use structure? Do you have tools you use to manage the creative process, or is it pretty free?
Yeah, I mean, there's tools. We have certain ideas that we want to talk about. We're always making sure that it fits in within our overall strategy.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily designed to focus, so it's not traditional creativity. It's more creativity in terms of content and marketing, but there's still creativity involved in how we get what we use.
So there are a series of questions that need to be answered over the course of a day, and the team works their way through them. Interesting. Very cool. What about the rest of you? Other shops that do other things around creativity? Yeah? So freeform journaling, 3 pages a day, every day, a team commitment, and that, what's the intent? But it's interesting. You talk about that journaling as a way to get those thoughts to come out that you perhaps didn't know were there, but it's, again, like I said, this is not anarchy. You are dedicating a piece of your day. You're working hard. You're focusing. You have a specific task that you need to accomplish, and that's the way that you get to that kind of creative gold. Is by not just letting it go and letting it be freeform and learning it. So you need to revisit the material a little while after. But that's more work. That's you write for your 3 hours and you go back and read some of the old stuff. Like that's structure. I like that. That makes me comfortable. But I do the same thing. I assume a lot of the people in this room, lots of you use kind of these books where you track stuff. Mine has to be by my bed. I'm sure it's the same for the rest of you. I screwed up when I was putting this presentation together. 2 nights I was lying in bed and I had these thoughts about what I could say or some profound thing, and I was convinced, that's so profound. I'm not going to forget that. So yeah, what you got was creativity is not anarchy. That wasn't one of those thoughts. Yeah, that's a good tool. I use that too. So using a whiteboard to actually create kind of a tangible or to spend some physical energy on creating these ideas and to track them. And that's actually, when you come back to the tools, there's some really interesting tools you can use specifically around kind of movement and physicality to help the ideas and the creative stuff come a little bit more easily. So everybody, there you go. There's your epiphany for today. There's a whiteboard in the shower. That's kind of brilliant. I don't know what my wife would think. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that we get into dangerous territory when we start to explain creativity too much. I think we can allow it to stay a symbol, an idea, something that's that you can't put your finger on. Those little spots you get in your eye that you can't actually look right at. They're always in the periphery. That's what creativity is. It's something you can't actually ever quite get there on your own. But for me, the process is a way of relaxing the mind. So do I think that there's a point where process starts to become fetish? Could you? I don't know. You know what? I'm wondering whether my context for the use of the word fetish is different, but it helped me understand a little bit more. It's a really good point. So do we focus so much on the process that we start to lose track of what the process is supposed to be creating? And I think that you can. I think that one of the challenges is that again, what the process is supposed to be creating is something that is not defined until the process has been undertaken. You can't know where you're going to end up until you go through that process. So I may slip into the trap of focusing a lot on process, but the process isn't developed with, my process hasn't been developed with a mind towards a certain end, towards a certain goal, towards getting to a specific place. It's developed to allow for the space that we were just talking about to lead you off in directions you didn't expect. So it's designed to take you way far out and then to reel you back in from those crazy places, with a base of knowledge and understanding. But I think that's a fair question. I think that for me to get my head around the idea is really hard because process gives me the structure I need to do my work. So I think I suppose you could get a little too fixated on it. But our processes are pretty flexible. They're really not designed with one specific end. So I hope that they don't. I hope they don't do that. We'll see. Yeah. So that we need process because our clients and we expect that the process gives structure to what we're doing, and that makes everyone feel safe. But sometimes not having a process and experiencing things outside of the creative process is one of the tools you use to be more creative or to bring those things up. Yeah. So we need to do things that are not necessarily that aren't necessarily related to the end product, that give us more skill in different creative areas. But it could be sports, could be athletics of some sort, but it frees your mind. Boxing, yeah, Valerie boxes. Seriously, she's actually dangerous. For me, that it's interesting, that idea of stepping outside and doing things you're uncomfortable with. Some of these creative tools that I've been learning, again, and they're tools, because they're just one piece. You could do, if there's 12 tools, I could use 3 of them for this creative process, or 4 different ones for a different one. Those are, for me, those are really uncomfortable. Those, I don't like brainstorming, because I like my ideas to come out fully formed. I feel like unless it's the right answer, it's very uncomfortable. So for me, that's the practice. I think for a lot of you that comes naturally, but I've had to let go a little bit. My parents told me I was smart when I was a kid, and I think now I feel like everything I say has to be smart, and if it's not, then everyone's going to figure me out. So again, brainstorming's hard, but for a lot of you, that comes as kind of a natural talent. So the focus that comes from a deadline gives you the ability to incorporate all the things that need to be incorporated and come up with some sort of creative solution that fits. That's magic. I know, I hate that. I don't know how to make that work apart from just putting everything off till the deadline. I can do that. So you focus more towards the end of a deadline, but do you think that's because you've come to the conclusion and you found the right direction, or because you have to focus when you get to the deadline?
I think it's ideas and making something.
So there's an interesting thing. Like, you have to shave it down to one, and there isn't necessarily a right or wrong, and that's one of the things about creative, is that sometimes you just have to commit and make it work. So ultimately, we need to blame the education system. Okay, that's fair. I can get around that. Yeah.